In 2021, Saudi Arabia unveiled a vision for the future that felt like science fiction. A mirrored city 170 kilometers long, designed to house 9 million people in the middle of the desert. They called it the Line. But as the shimmering renders met the reality of physics, the questions began to pile up.
When you dig a bit deeper, you think, well, how much steel and concrete do we need to build this? It'll be 170 square kilometers of mirrored glass. Who cleans it?
From the impossible transit schedules to the basic logistics of garbage and sewage, the world began to wonder, is this even possible?
One critic described it as clickbait visible from space. Another critic has described it as the Death Star with hanging gardens.
This is the story of how a $1 trillion dream became a logistical nightmare. You might think of a city starting with plans from urban developers who study topography, resource management, and population growth. But it seems the line did not start with intrigue from urban planners. Instead, it began with the fascinations of a single leader, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia.
They say in a lot of projects that happen in Saudi Arabia, it can be done. This is very ambitious. They can keep saying that, and we can keep proving them wrong.
The line is part of NEOM, a giant area within Saudi Arabia meant to serve as a major development zone for Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's plan to remake the kingdom's economy beyond oil.
So since we have empty place and we want to have a place for 10 million people, then let's think from scratch.
But how many of the major ideas for the line were coming from established architects, and how many were from the Crown Prince? According to numerous reports, the exact dimensions of the line were dictated entirely from the top down. Advisors gently suggested that a 100-meter tall structure would be feasible, but the Crown Prince mandated it be 500 meters high, 200 meters wide, and entirely encased in mirrors.
You can't look at this the first time and not ask yourself, what are they thinking? But then as soon as you start to get into it, you start to sort of think about the possibilities of it.
And it's worth noting, pushing large-scale projects to the limits is nothing new.
So you go back to Bologna in the 16th century, and different families would build towers. And the taller the tower, the more wealthy and powerful you were. I think what we have with a line is a continuation of that, using a building to send a powerful message to the world about power and advancement.
But this was not just a building. The line was an entirely new concept for human existence. The planning included neighborhoods fulfilling the daily needs for its 9 million residents within a 5-minute walk.
It makes life very convenient then, right? Everything's within walking distance.
9 million people on a footprint of 34 square kilometers. And so that's a density of about 264,000 people per square kilometer. It's twice as dense as Hong Kong. So it would be the densest place on Earth.
So, what are the problems with the line's design? The city is pitched as a solution to urban sprawl and a cleaner model for city living. But this utopian blueprint was fundamentally at odds with the physical and economic realities of our world. According to reports, once designers began working through the details, basic functions that are almost invisible in normal cities suddenly became unique design problems. Water and sewage, mail delivery, rubbish removal, and fire safety all had to be reconsidered from scratch. This is the central weakness of the line. It took systems that are supposed to be boring and made them experimental. One of the most revealing stories comes from the planned hidden marina, where a suspended upside-down office tower, the so-called chandelier, was meant to hang above a huge artificial harbor. When an architect raised a very basic question about what happens when toilets flush in an upside-down structure, the reported answer was not a simple fix. It was an idea involving hundreds of shuttle cars moving sewage back and forth on retractable bridges. Even if you treat that as one designer's recollection, it captures the larger problem. The project kept turning routine urban services into science fiction logistics. The same thing happened with travel to the airport. Reporting says one senior architect noticed that the station platforms and lifts were undersized and that the trains lacked luggage racks. The reported answer was that passengers would not bring luggage with them in the normal way at all. They would send it separately, and in one account would need to leave bags outside their home many hours before a flight. That is not a city becoming more convenient. That is the city asking ordinary life to adapt itself to the system. And that seems to be the theme of the whole project, with the line presented as a city designed around human needs. But the deeper it was designed, the more it began to look like a place where human routines would have to bend around the demands of the concept. Take a look at the transportation system, which is meant to include a high-speed rail line hidden beneath the city, transporting people from one end of the 170-kilometer stretch to the other in just 20 minutes.
Spine of the line is a fast rail system that connects the point A to the point B, the C to the mountains. That's the only thing that can genuinely replace having cars.
But these promises start to pull against each other as soon as you imagine actual life inside a 170-kilometer city. Reports note the 20-minute estimate assumed a train that did not stop along the route to pick up or drop off passengers. That's a revealing detail, because a real city cannot function on end-to-end journeys alone. It needs local access with frequent stops. It needs ordinary people to be able to move around without every trip turning into a carefully choreographed transfer. And once planners started trying to solve that problem, the network became more complex, not less. The deeper problem has also been studied directly. A 2023 paper in MPJ Urban Sustainability argued that the line would need at least 86 stations just to keep residents within walking distance of transit. But with that many stations, trains would stop too often to sustain the kind of speed the marketing implied. The authors estimated a random trip inside the line would average at least 60 minutes, and that at least 47% of the population would still face commutes longer than an hour. Even a layered network of local and express services offered only limited relief because transfers start eating away at the time savings. So the problem was never that a fast train is impossible. The problem was that a city this long has to be both a metro network and a high-speed corridor at the same time. It has to be local and regional simultaneously. Other issues in the hidden marina may be the clearest expression of the whole project, because the construction of an enormous linear city wasn't enough. The centerpiece of the line is meant to include a huge artificial harbor, a suspended upside-down tower, and a stadium perched above that. But according to a report in the Financial Times, designers themselves were already warning that physics might not cooperate. One description of the suspended tower said that movement and sway could turn it into a giant pendulum that might eventually break apart and crash to the water below. The point is not simply that the design was bold, but concerned that these ideas were over the edge of practicality. The marina also reportedly had a basic environmental problem. Without natural current, the water risked stagnation and would need giant pumps running continuously to keep it circulating. Even light became a problem. Reporting on the project said natural light was limited in many of the public spaces deep inside the structure, while gardens had to be concentrated where the sun could still reach them. So the same project that was supposed to restore a healthier relationship between people and nature was also producing an urban environment heavily dependent on artificial systems for light, climate, and circulation. And outside the structure, environmental concerns did not disappear. Other reporting has highlighted people that have been displaced for the construction to begin, and its impact on migratory bird routes and wildlife corridors. But completion of the line as a city capable of housing millions of people, even if construction is spread out over a period of decades, is looking more and more doubtful. Reuters reported in 2024 that the line alone was expected by one consultant to cost over $1 trillion, and that work had narrowed to a 2.4-kilometer stretch tied to a stadium for the 2034 World Cup final. By early 2026, reporting said expectations for 2030 had fallen to fewer than 300,000 residents instead of the earlier hopes of around 1.5 million. That does not necessarily mean every part of the line disappears. Some version of it may still be built, but the original promise was a city that would reinvent urban life. What remains looks increasingly like a much smaller, slower, cost-managed residue of that promise. And that gap between what was sold and what could be sustained is the real story. But in spite of the challenges, the project continued with hopes for improvement.
Many projects sort of acquire their sanity as you move along, and that's I think very, very much the case here too. And the jury's out.
Well, we are bringing all the piece of puzzle together. I don't know what's the outcome of it. That's gonna be the creativity of the people gonna live from the whole globe in NEOM.
In the end, the line may be remembered less as a city than as a lesson in what happens when architecture becomes spectacle before it becomes logistics, when master plans are approved before the boring systems make sense,